What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Just Stores with BT. I'm really excited today because I love all my guests, but when I have guests on with accents, it's even better because I'm such a fan of accents. It just makes storytelling just like exponentially better. So today I have April Sabral. Did I get that right? I just asked. Who's the author of Positive Effect and has done a million different things, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But first off, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and I can thank my parents because they're Americans, but they went to England and had us all there. So I always thank them for the accent.
I'm so jealous. Like I wish that was my story, but it's not. So here's what I'm gonna do, April. Okay. So everybody always struggles with what to say about themselves, right? Like, how do I describe myself? How do I do it 30 seconds or like an hour? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just tell your life story in like 30, 45 seconds. And then you tell me what are the big glaring things that I missed. Sound good?
I love it.
Okay. So here we go. Everybody, this is April. In a quick snapshot. Okay, so first off, she was born in the UK in a small town called Hastings on the south coast to two parents, which she mentioned were Americans. So they moved there, had her there. So obviously she was born and raised in the north of England, and then eventually moved to the big city of London when she got older. As a kid, her mom had an antique shop. So she literally grew up inside of retail. So that's a little bit of foreshadowing into her career. Always traveling on the weekends, buying stuff for the shop, selling things. And she said everything in her house was for sale, which I love. As a child, she was into piano, painting, and playing with her twin. So she has a twin. We're going to talk about that. Her first job as she got older was, of course, retail. And when she started going to school, she ended up dropping out, getting kicked out of the house. Apparently, we'll have to talk about that. And started, into this career path of becoming a retail mogul, right? So I love reading through the history because, you started with Gap and then went to Starbucks and then went to Laura Canada and became a director at Apple, and eventually a director at Hunt and the Renfrew. And then, which I love, is you became a global vice president of retail for David's Teas, which I'm sure doing the global thing gave you a whole different understanding of the landscape of our business. And that led you into founding two different companies. The first one was HospitalityU, and then RetailU, which allows people to kind of learn leadership and about the retail business anywhere they are, obviously remote, which is fantastic. And along the way, the two most important things that happened in your life was having two kids that you raised, and not just in one country, but three, because you moved twice to two different countries along that whole pathway, which is pretty crazy. And recently you became listed to the Forbes Coaches Council, which is really cool. And if that wasn't enough, you produced and put out your first book, The Positive Effect, which we're going to talk about and get a 10,000. Yes, there it is. Awesome. Good plug. And so I love all of that, right? And you mentioned something too about growing up having a lisp and how that was challenging and how you had to get through that and how retail actually helped, which I would love to hear about. So you take all that and tell me in the audience, what did I miss? What else would they need to know about April's life?
I think you got it all there. Like, honestly, I mean, other than RetailU was the first company that I started. So hospitality is kind of there in the background. We haven't really done much of that yet, but RetailU is the baby. And now just some other things that have just happened in the last week. I got put on the retail influencer list, which was cool. The retail
Nice. I saw that.
list. Saw that. And I'm launching aprilsabral.com as a leadership company now, along with the book. So that's coming out in February with some inspiration cards and some cool things. But yeah, you kind of got it. It sounds like, when I listen to that story, I'm like, that's crazy. Like, you did all of that.
I know. It looked crazy. Your experience is amazing. So tell me a couple things I want to go back to. So first off, what is it like having a twin? And is your twin like boy, girl? What is this deal?
Yeah, so she's an identical twin.
Okay.
Yeah, so girl, and she's very successful in her career choice. She's also an author. She's written 3 books, and she's
Whoa.
in news. So she's finding crazy stories every day. And I think, it's bittersweet because growing up, I had my best friend, and I learned a lot from her. but we are estranged twins, so we don't really have a strong relationship, and that people find that really interesting and like, how is that possible? But there's many things that go into the complexities of that. I've
Yeah.
studied it later on in life now. I've read books about why twins become estranged, and as a parent, like I think it's hard being a parent, but parenting twins, I don't know how you do that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's many things to that. But I mean, it was great growing up because I had, like I said, that best friend, that person that I could kind of, learn everything from. And I think taught me to really listen and observe,
Yeah.
and kind of see somebody that looked like me doing things like falling down the stairs. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to do what she just did. I'm going to turn around backwards, like, and go down
Yeah.
slowly. So I had like this person to learn from. And my dad always says that. He says he has this memory of us like sitting in the house and like posting letters through the door to each other, like just like a postman, playing games. So that was kind of cool. My one, goal in my life would be able to repair that relationship. We have relationships that, fall off, and hopefully by the end of this lifetime, but maybe in another one, we'll be friends again. But she's very successful. She's written some amazing books as well. She's very interesting.
And you mentioned, dealing with having a lisp, early in life, and obviously that being difficult. Like, what do you think, struggling through that as a kid and like growing through it, how do you think that actually impacted you as you kind of moved into work and adulthood?
That's a great question. I think when I was younger, having a lisp and not being able to be confident with speaking was really difficult. And I remember being in the playground and people coming up to me and, asking me to say specific words with th in it specifically, because those are the words that you really struggle with. And I was thinking, oh, they want to talk to me, and then all of a sudden, kids are mean, right? And then they
Yep.
just start laughing about, how I was saying things. So it really did shut me down. I mean, when I went into retail, like you said earlier, when you kind of did the overview, it really taught me that I had to have a voice and really listen to people, and speak to people and like present things. So that really did help me gain confidence. I think where it's impacted me in my leadership is I understand the feeling of not being heard and seen, and not feeling valued really as a person, because that's how I felt in those younger years. And so as a leader in my career, I really make it my mission to not judge others, and to, slow down and ask questions and listen and help people be seen and heard on my teams. And I think that's
Yeah.
what's caused a lot of success for me, because when you are in communications with people and relationships with people, everybody wants to be heard and seen, right? Like that's, we all want that connection. We all want to feel like we have a voice. And so, I think that experience really was helpful. At the time, it could have been painful, but, like a lot of experiences in life, right? When you go through challenges, it builds your resilience skills. And as long as you're willing to learn something from it and kind of look internally. And so those feelings, I remember. And when I work with people, I try and kind of think about this thing that, what they say is not necessarily what they're thinking or who they are. And so to really focus on what they're sharing versus how they're sharing it, which I don't know about you, but I've had lots of bosses that are like, oh, when you say it this way, you're perceived that way. And so it can, again, shut people down. So I try and remember those experiences and use them and bring them into the current reality, of working with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just like you, I've been in retail for a long time, and I spent most of my career in training and development. So tons of speaking in classrooms and all, and training and new hires and all this stuff. And, one of the things, especially in the last, let's call it 5-8 years, when we're dealing with a lot more millennials in the workforce, and now even the next generation, I've found that communication and how people are saying things has become probably like the number one thing I deal with, because I don't want to say people as a whole have become more sensitive, but what it is, I think, is that the younger generation is not used to a more direct type of communication or anything aggressive, and so if you have somebody that just lays something out real hard, people can tend to be like really offended or get really hurt. And so I found that, like, now I seem like I'm coaching so much around how to speak with tact and softness, but be direct. and it's a talent that I feel like a lot of people just don't have. And so you have to almost like train it, so people understand, like, I try to tell people, like, listen, no one's going to get upset with you if you speak and you really are respecting the person and you have a lot of tact and you can soften the edges and deliver your message. It's going to be receptive. It's just that as soon as people feel it's coming as a threat or aggressive or whatever, they put these walls, especially I found with, kind of some of these younger generations. And so it seems like that's become a more part of what I do. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, me too. It's really funny. Even like how you write an email, the word choice you use, right? Like, because I always say communication has a negative, positive, or neutral effect, right?
Mhm.
So you can say something, it has no effect, it just is what it is. Or you can say something and it totally swings people this way, or you can say something that leaves somebody with a positive feeling, and that positive feeling grows to people around them, because energy is
Yeah.
real, vibration is real in my world anyway. And so that's really important. And I was in a meeting the other day, it's funny you say that, and somebody used the word non-negotiable. Now back in the day, that was like, this is a non-negotiable, this non-negotiable means not up for discussion, really.
Yeah.
That's what it means. And then I thought about that and I was like, man, can you imagine if that was being said to a 24-year-old or a 25-year-old, that younger generation now? I wonder how they would receive that. Because it was, a more mature group,
Yeah.
somebody that used it. And I was like, they probably like non-negotiable. My life importance is more non-negotiable. And I was like,
Yeah.
we have to find another term for non-negotiable,
Yeah.
because I think that word is a little bit strong. So I like what you're
Yeah.
saying about that choice of words and coaching people on what
Yep.
words to use, because there is these phrases that we were used to, but like really aren't really going to cut it now.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, even in our sales training, we've, like over time, I've adapted, like, when I first was in sales, especially commission sales back in the day, we would talk about if a customer said no, or a guest, you would handle the objection, right? Like handling
Right.
objections training, these steps. And it's like, that's all, now if anything, it's maybe like, let's talk about their concerns, or like some way to say it. Because it's, yeah, to your point, I mean, those kind of hard things are just, they don't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. There's a whole chapter in the book actually where I actually lay out conversations of like, this is what it did sound like. How do you
Yes.
feel about it? And then if it sounds like this, how do you feel about it? And you actually
Oh,
see like the
nice.
shift in energy when you read the second option of how to say it differently. Um, yeah, words matter, right? They
Oh,
really matter.
oh my God. Yeah. And so I want to talk about, we're going to do that in 1 second. I'm asking about the book. But before that, last thing is,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. So just tying a bow around, like you said, about growing up with a list, getting through it, all that. Do you believe that, because I've interviewed now lots of very successful people, and one of the common threads that I see is with so many peers and so many successful people and friends and people who end up having these great careers and writing books and all this stuff, is there seems to be an event or something in their childhood that gives them a fire that some people just don't have, right? Like I think of, like, Les Brown, the
Yeah.
speaker, like he was one of my favorite motivational speakers and I love his stuff. But, like you hear someone who was told he was, basically retarded, educable retarded, I think is what his teachers had told him when he was a kid. But it created this fire, to be the speaker one day, even though everyone was like, the world's against you, it's never going to happen. But it was like this thing he's never going to stop. And I feel like, do you think something like that, because obviously here you are now training and speaking and writing books, and you know what I mean? Like, do you think that was something that created that, like when you were able to overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, two things. So I think having a twin sister where I felt undervalued by her because we have an estranged relationship, and that happened when we were around 14, 15, I think, as we started to grow. That really fueled me and my passion to like help other people feel valued. I didn't know at the time that it was going to be retail, but I knew as I started to grow that my natural leadership style of making sure everybody's voice felt valued was definitely related to that feeling of how I felt about my twin sister not valuing me. And I can remember, like, in my late 20s, actually sitting down with her, having a conversation, saying, so, what value do I bring to your life? And the answer she gave me, I was like, that's it. She still doesn't recognize what I do. So that's one thing. The second very pivotal thing about why I started to build a online retail education company was because I was working at a Holt Renfrew in Canada, and I was director of operations. And, in retail, you get pigeonholed. You're like in stores. I didn't go through a formal education, like you said. And so I had grown up through the ranks, and I had read leadership books, and I was building teams. And there was this role, a role that came about that said, training and development director. And I was like, oh, that's me. I train and build people all day. I want to go apply for that job. So I, had the interview, whatever. And she said to me at the end of it, and I was really excited about it. She said to me at the end of it, April, thanks for coming, but you're never going to get a job in L&D in HR because you're just not formally trained in it. You do really well in sales and operations, and that's what you should focus on. And I walked out of that. I thought, screw you, I'm going to go build my own L&D company then. So that's what I did. I built a leadership development company, and that's what fueled me to go and get some certifications afterwards, like not big ones, John Maxwell, not university ones, but coaching leadership ones. And I built my own company. I love telling that story because I'm like, I was mad at her when she told me that because I was like, that's not fair. But then now I'm so grateful for that, because if she hadn't said that, maybe RetailU and wouldn't exist. I don't know.
I love it. I love hearing those stories. I think, life, and obviously, like you said, we're both parents, and, life, when I talk to my kids, so much of the time when things happen, you try to show and you try to talk to your kids about, you can't be protected from bad things happening. You can't protect yourself from bad news or things not going your way. But what's within your control is your reaction. And what are you going to do next? And so, as cliche as it sounds, what I've found in talking to people like yourself, is that there's generally a common thread amongst people who have done well, which is they respond to adversity, in a positive way, right? Like, okay, that happened. All right, what's my step, right? And I've been around some amazing entrepreneurial CEOs that have blown my mind with how they interpret like something going wrong. The sky's falling, everything's on fire, and they're like, oh, you know what, actually, let's pivot and do this whole thing over here. And it turns into like a bazillion-dollar venture, and it's like, oh my God, how do you do that? And it's great, so I've always tried to emulate that.
So positive attitude. I truly also believe in the law of cause and effect. Like, I live my life by it. So it's like, whatever I think about comes about, and like everything has an outcome, right? So whatever I'm doing today is going to manifest in my world tomorrow. So I'm very responsible with that mindset. And so that really fuels me. And, being a parent, being a single mom, that fueled me to provide, right? I had to provide for my kids. So that really drove like me wanting to do more as well.
Yeah. I saw that in there, but I didn't want to mention anything. But now that you brought it up, now I can talk about it, right? So what do you think? Because I'm also a single parent, and I've made this case before on this show, and I've had some really good dialogue. But I feel, it's just my personal opinion, that because there's a lot of people out there hiring for roles, and I've had single parents before where they got turned down roles or opportunities just because I think companies or executives somewhere were concerned about their schedule or this or that or whatever. And my contention has been, I feel the strongest professionals I've ever worked with have been single parents. And the reason I believe that is because I think there's more of a sense of urgency around having to be successful, because you're like, hey, I got people relying on me, and I'm like on my own, I'm trying to figure it out, like there's no failure here. I got to figure it out, and I think it causes like people to just take things up a notch. And the other thing is, obviously depending on the situation, but a lot of parents like myself, I have an amazing co-parent, my kid's mom is phenomenal. And so we have a great relationship. But what I found when I ended up in this situation, 7 years ago or whatever, is all of a sudden I had a few nights a week where I didn't have my kids. And then it was like, okay, well, what do I do during this time? And I ended up diving into work and side projects and things like this, because it fuels me and bring out a passion and allows me to do things and grow and become a better version of myself, right? Versus being, obviously like taking it to a different path, but what would you say about that? And have you seen, in your long retail career, what, would you say around being a single parent in the workforce?
Yeah, I think what you said is really relevant. I think people make assumptions, right, about schedules or commitments and that perception of like doing more hours and working hard. And people say all the time, "Oh yeah, you don't need to work hard." I don't agree with that. I think you do have to work hard if you want to be successful. You
Yeah.
got to put the hustle in. Um, I can't say that single parents are more successful than others because I wouldn't want to make that sweeping judgment because
No,
I
for
know a lot
sure.
of people that are not single parents that are successful. But there is this, I didn't have that co-parenting situation. Like I raised them myself. And people are always like, you took them to two countries. I was like, yeah, I just took them with me on the journey, right? Like I was always willing to take on more if somebody asked me to move and do something and just saw that as just bringing them along with me. But there is this sense of like you like what you said, you can't fail. I had this sense of like I can't fail. Now, is that because I'm a single parent? Could be, yeah, because I have these two people that I have to be responsible for. The downside of that is I think now because they're older, I have a 24-year-old and an 18-year-old now, is that I look back and think there's times where I didn't have the brain space or the downtime to spend with them, and really have that parenting time, like just that brain space of like just being more present. Luckily, I get to do that now because they're older and it's not so crazy and I've got my own schedule a bit more now, so that's very helpful. But definitely that pressure of like I can't fail. I need a paycheck. I need to feed them. I'm gonna say, and it was not easy by any means. And I'm sure there was many times they were like, "My mom, she wasn't listening to me, or she wasn't." I've had those conversations now,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Are single parents more successful? I don't know. I would love somebody to do a poll on that,
Yes,
like
I
get
would too.
statistics going and figure that out. But yeah, not making assumptions. I mean, I think people make assumptions about women having babies and all that kind of stuff anyway.
Yep.
That's like out there. People don't get promoted or they miss out. That's why there's not a lot of women CEOs, right? Because there's
Yeah.
that stigma around like, you know, having a family and can they really do the job. So I
Yeah.
think that's a whole other thing but can get changed, but didn't
No, for
stop me.
sure.
you know
Yeah, I mean, my entire second season of the show, I think there was 14 episodes, was just focused on, female executives in underrepresented industries. And, I asked all of them, for different stories, especially around, times when they may have been, passed up for a job or, treated a certain way. Yeah. And some of the stories were just incredible. You're like mad listening. You're like, how is this possible?
Yeah,
Um,
I would say that there was probably situations in my career, experiences or leaders that I was working with, and to get that next role or that promotion, maybe there was parts of me as a parent and my personal life that I didn't show, that I didn't feel like I could show, that I had to just be this professional person and not really talk about what was going on when I got home, or like running around trying to figure out somebody that could drop this kid off for me or take care of
yeah.
them for 2 hours. Like they didn't see all of that. And I never really talked about it. But now you can talk about it because everybody's got kids running around on Zoom calls
Yeah.
in their meetings and like sitting on people's knees. So I wish that was like that 15 years
Yeah.
ago. But it wasn't, right?
No, for sure. I think, the last 2 years, I think it truly actually did a lot for just the mental realization of what's acceptable and what needs to be acceptable, because to your point, I mean, everybody got forced into this, oh, I got to work from home and the realities of, whoa, this is difficult and this is hard to juggle. And, and then there's obviously this whole other section of people that's been doing that forever. And you're like, hey, yeah, it's very difficult. So I think people hopefully are a little bit more understanding. And I think we've also learned, at least I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I've been fortunate enough to be in a hybrid situation the last couple of years. A couple of days in the office, a few days at home or traveling or whatever. And I feel like that's such a great balance, because I think we've learned there is a lot of things you can do from home. There's so much work and so much productivity that you can do from home, but we've also learned that there's things that you need to be in person, and I think this taught us both the importance of meetings and collaboration and being together for ideation and things like that, versus also the importance of like, yeah, I can just shut the door and be at home and work and get things done. You know what I mean? And I don't know, how has that played out in your career?
Yeah, I mean, being in retail and running multi-site leaders across the country, we've been remote forever and a day. Like we've,
Mhm.
unless you were in a store in a box, but once you got to multi-site and you had 10 stores, you were always managing remotely and
Yep.
working from home. So I think other industries can actually learn from the retail field leaders of how to do that, because we've been holding Zoom calls, conference calls forever, and learning how to build connected relationships from afar. That's what we do, right? And when I had 250 stores, I had 4 regional directors and they had subgroups. There were so many things I could do, but that I think other industries can learn from it. But I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and there's a book called Office Optional. Now, I don't think I'm going to get the name of the guy that wrote it, because I'd have to go and find the podcast, but it's called Office Optional. He runs a very successful consulting company, and they were interviewing him because he has been doing a hybrid basically for 12 years since he started his company. And now he was writing that optional office optional book 3 years ago, but like what good timing for him, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the book came out and now he's getting flown around to speak to companies about how they make this work. And
yeah,
he really talked about there's parameters on specific ways of how to do it. I want to pick it up because he says that, yes, he does get people together, like you said about ideation. That can only happen, that creative kind of process, when you're in a room feeling energy. So 4 times a year, he gets subgroups together. But for the most part, they've been remote for 12 years. And I'm so interested to hear about that, because he said he's won culture awards for his company.
yeah.
And people are always like, how do you create a culture when everybody's remote? It's like, it's not that difficult. It's about how people feel about who they work with every day and how they show up every day. And that forms culture. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. So I think, yeah, I
No,
think there's a
totally.
lot to learn, right, from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that, at least in my personal opinion, and I'd love to hear yours, especially with retail, I look back at, my 18-year career in retail and these different companies, and at one point, yeah, I oversaw this one for one company, everything west of the Mississippi, which was, a couple thousand stores, and I think I had 17 directors, and it was impossible to, like, at first, to build relationships. So what I realized was, almost like you're talking about with this book, is I needed to just do offsites a couple times a year, because what happens is, even for people who work every day 9 to 5 in a normal office, most people don't do anything. They don't go out. They don't, they just come to work and whatever, and they leave, they have meetings, whatever. It doesn't mean they're building bonds, right? So what I found is, if you multiple times a year actually can take a group, get them out of the normal environment, go somewhere, you go on a trip, you do a thing, you do a retreat, whatever it is, those are memories and bonds that last forever. And so I think companies that invest, especially retails, at least in my experience, has always been good about this. Do manager retreats, you do leadership retreats. Like, these are things that it fuels you for another 6 months. There's something to be said about sitting next to your CEO, in Vegas at a poker table, just having a normal conversation until 2 in the morning. That all of a sudden now you're like, oh, I actually know this. I feel like I know this person, and that will get people going. At least in my experience, it has.
Yeah, I agree. When I had my regional directors at David's Tea, we would do an offsite in every different region. So 4 times a year, because I had 4 regions. And so we would go to their market. We do some store visits, do some operational stuff, do some planning, but then we would go and do some activities. One of the ones I really remember was when we went to Banff and we went up in that gondola.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
you know. And I remember some of the team were like, "Oh my God, this is so high, I can't take it." And then some of us were like, "What? You're like so adventurous. We didn't expect it." So you learn these different
Yeah.
personality traits, and like that's a memory that I'll always remember, and things I learned about people because they were not in their work environment. They got to kind of put
Yes.
that mask down a little bit and connect personally. And like you said, that does really, it really fuels people. I think retail is quite good about doing that with the field operations teams, not so much with the HO teams, because
Yeah.
they're in an office every day, so they see each other. But like you said, people go in, do their job, and then leave,
Yeah.
and then they're in meetings back to back. But the field, because they are remote, naturally, that's why we would always want to pull them together,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's a harder now, but still
Yeah.
doable. But I think, again, a lot of industries can learn from that. Retail is funny to me because it's one of those industries that it's always perceived as, not very educated, or it's very accidental. And like, oh, you're not that smart. But I'm like, we run millions of dollars and like lead thousands of people.
Yeah.
And there's so many best practices in that group, as I'm talking field operations because that's, you know, the division I'm in, that other people can learn from that they do really, really well.
Oh yeah. So tell us the perfect segue. So tell us about Positive Effect. Give us the kind of 10,000 foot version of the book and kind of what's it about? Why should we get it?
Yeah, so it's about my retail journey. Specifically, it's got really great, funny stories in there about what I've learned along the way. But it really introduces my leadership methodology because when I built RetailU and you know, not coming from an L&D background and all of that, one of the things when I would show up to share HR leaders about the courses, they'd be like, yes, but April, you know, what is your methodology on leadership? You know, like situational leadership or like, you know, there's all these models, right? Like blue, green, yellow, what are you, red? And so I wanted to introduce my style of leading because my style of leading has made me successful. So I wanted to share that with others. And so that's really what the book's about. It introduces you to ACT, leading with awareness. And ACT is 3 pillars, so accept, create, teach. And underneath those 3 pillars, there's 5 ways to demonstrate that. And I hope that it inspires people to really change the way they see leadership as not as a model or a personality type, but more of a way of being. Because the more that we're aware of our impact on others and the way that we show up, the more that we can have a positive effect on the people that are around us that translates into their lives, by the way, not just them at work. Like if people are happier for the person they work for, it does make a difference in their lives. They go home, they talk about how great work is to their friends and family, and then you get these fans and then they're your customers and it just keeps spreading. So that's really it. That it introduces that book. So if you're a leader and you don't actually have to work in retail to get something from this book or actually be a leader, because you just really want to be a leader in your own life and learn, become more self-aware, realize like how you show up and how you say things and what you do has an impact on your life and therefore others. And then you know, it teaches you that. So there's a methodology. So accept, create, teach. Accept is being supportive, having no assumptions, getting neutral in situations. So again, it's a way of being. Create is like thinking about what you're thinking about, because what you think about comes to reality. So it's that whole kind of philosophy on law of cause and, you know, cause and effect, and creating really good environments for people. And then teachers become a coach and a mentor to people, because the more you do that, the less frustrated you are. If you go into a situation and you're like, somebody's saying something and you have this coach approach, like you just shared earlier, you know, I find myself coaching a lot about communication. But if you were going to this situation going, why are they saying that? You weren't having that coach approach, you'd probably be more frustrated. And so it just introduces those. And then from that, there's other things coming down the pipeline. We launched a certification program last year on the RetailU platform, teaching this methodology, and the leaders that went through it, some of them had been leaders for 25 years and they were like, I can see what I've done wrong, or I could see why that person left my team, because they became more self-aware, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So
so
yeah,
cool. I can't wait to read it. Might have to have my whole leadership team do it. That would be perfect. Yeah, we all went through Ron's book on Retail Pride together. So my whole team, and we'd talk about it every week on our meetings. So this could just be the next book. It'd be perfect.
Yeah, I love it. I love Ron's book as well. It's very different. It's kind of funny because we both have the same kind of career trajectory. Like
Yeah,
he's
totally.
on this mission of like retail heroes and pride, and you know, having pride, which I love. And then I'm on this mission of like, let's make retail leaders better, you know, so that the environments become better.
Yes.
And so it's a you know, it's a leadership book. That's what it
No,
is.
that's awesome. And what's like, if you think back over your career, or maybe something in the book, what's like, do you have a favorite kind of funny experience or story that you love to tell from your retail career?
Yeah, I mean, I have this $1 million chocolate bar story that everybody
Yes.
always remembers when they read the book. It's really funny. I'll try and like make it in 2 minutes, right?
Good time.
So, so yeah, I was working at this retailer. We were planning Black Friday. You know, everybody knows Black Friday is like a huge deal, right? And the stores had been open 3 years. We were sitting in a planning meeting. You know, there was visual buying, me. I had stores. And we had the sales goal on the wall, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to meet this sales goal. And this new VP gets hired, and none of us have met her yet. She walks into the room, she looks at the sales goal on the wall, and she's like, yeah, that's not going to work. That needs to like double. So our sales goal was like, I think it was like 550K. She's like, yeah, it needs to be $1 million. And then she just left. And we were all like sitting there going, what the heck was that? And then spent the rest of the meeting figuring out who was going to tell her that she's out to lunch instead of thinking about how we can make $1 million. So I got the task of going to tell her that she was out to lunch, obviously, because I ran the store. So like, you're going to be the one to go tell her. So I walked downstairs, after 2 hours of discussing why we couldn't achieve it. And I walk into her office and I'm like, hey, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. Can I, have a conversation? Just looking at history and trend and what we've done before. And I don't think this is realistic. And she's like, April, if you don't believe you can achieve it, you won't achieve it. And that's it. That's all she said to me. And I was like, okay. So I walked out and said, well, that didn't go as well as I thought it was going to go. And obviously she knew more than we did because she got hired for a reason, right? So I was like, what do I do? What do I do? I got to go face everybody. I didn't meet my challenge. So I went home that night. I went to the dollar store. I bought like 24 chocolate bars, like in the big golden wrap. I created like on my Mac, like I'm a little, graphic designer kind of person, like $1 million bill with the brand on it. And I went back to the office the next day and I put them on everybody's desk before they got there. And I sent them to the stores. And I said, we're going to celebrate and we're going to eat these $1 million chocolate bars when we make the $1 million. And we never said anything else about it. We just looked at the chocolate bar. It was like 50 days out or something. And we just went to work and we beat the goal by 10%. And that really taught me something, right? About what you envision, you can see, what you can create, what you can manifest. And like just getting everybody else's buy-in and also just raising the bar. None of us thought we could do it, but we did. So yeah, people always remember that $1 million chocolate bar story.
Oh, I love it. That's brilliant. Yeah, I think you're so right. And it's funny because in my career, I've had a chance even just recently to roll out and like build full incentive programs, and it's amazing how at the end of a month, 2, 3, 4 days in, you've got people just jumping through, doing everything to hit this target. And you start to think to yourself, like, if they didn't have the target, there's no way they're doing it. They're not doing this, they're not coming in on the 6th day. They're not, they're calling every guest, whatever it is, because they're going to hit this thing. And you realize the importance of having these targets, and especially holidays, and I've always been, retail. One of the things I love about retail that I think, to your point, other industries can learn about, is I feel like retail is really good about having fun around big initiatives. It's like contests and dinner, like all these things, that we throw out there for these huge celebrations. And so much of the time it ends up coming true. And for the people behind the curtain or the executives, sometimes, you're back there going like, I can't believe we did it, but you had to put on that front, like we can do it. And sometimes you can, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I want to hear about RetailU a little bit, but I also want to hear, we talked about a favorite story, but, what about a story around failure? Like do you have something that you kind of look back in your careers and been like, oh man, that didn't go well, but then, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, there's been a few things that haven't gone well. God, wasn't prepared for that. What failure? What failure? I mean, there was a time in my career where I had just moved to Canada from the US, and I was not doing exceptionally well because I kept being perceived as direct, very aggressive, sales driven. The US is very different in terms of Canada. It's very business results. Let's do everything we can do to fix the business, do the business. So it's very business driven. And this was 20 years ago. And then Canada is very relationship driven. Like it's softer. The language is softer. People don't want to show up in a meeting, say the wrong thing and look bad. It's culturally, it's different, right? Countries are different. And so I remember that time being given that feedback and then applying for a director's role to get promoted within that organization. And the first time around, I didn't get it because of that feedback and that how I was perceived. And I was getting really good results, by the way. Like my team had the best results. And so I felt like, well, I should get the job because my results are better than anybody else's. But that was not the case, because if I was going to grow into this other role, it was about me working through others and building those relationships. And so what I learned in that moment was, yes, as much as my team that reports into me feels the support from me, if my peers don't feel like that and they feel like I'm a threat, how am I actually adding value to the organization? And so that really taught me a lot about cross-functional relationships peer relationships, how I showed up in meetings, not talking about myself all the time and what I was doing. And so taking the emphasis and focusing on others. Luckily, they did promote me in the end. But what I did was I asked for a 360 feedback from everybody that would have started to report into me. And then I said, go back and do the same one in 60 days and see if it's changed. And then for 60 days, all I had to do was build those relationships and not worry about their results, not focus on anything else, because I was very driven for results at that time, which I still am. But I learned that I had to change that. And the feedback came back 60 days later, and it had done a 180. People were like, oh, she's changed. She really listens. You know, I feel really supported. But knowing that experience set me up for like going into the C-suite and like how I needed to like kind of have people on my side before I actually applied for the job, you know, so that when I got the job, everybody understood why I was promoted, because then you're going to be more successful. And I think that's a big lesson, especially when you're in sales and you want to get that management role in any industry. Your results will speak, but it's how you have relationships with others that are going to make you successful when you take on more responsibilities of results.
No, 100%. You know, I used to speak at the college I went to, San Diego State, a lot, pre-COVID and all that. I would go back and speak once or twice a year to the kids. And, you know, one of the things I used to say is that phrase about, you know, it's all about who you know. I would say, you know, that's not the phrase, you know, because the reality is, yes, it's important about who you know, but it's more about the relationships you build. Because if you know a lot of people, but none of them would do anything for you or you know, recommend you, it doesn't matter. You can know a ton of people, but if you actually build relationships enough to where someone would take a flyer on you or recommend someone or go out of their way, I go, that's what's important. And, you know, to your point, you know, I think that sometimes, especially in any career, retail, whatever it is, oftentimes if you start at the bottom, right, you start as an associate somewhere, the layers between you and a CEO seem just, oh my God, right? And even a VP or an executive or whatever. But the reality is that all of those people are just people, right? Like anyone else, they have relationships, they have friends. They don't, most of them are just faking it till they make it anyways. You know, they started some company, next thing you know, they got 1,000 employees. They're like, what am I doing? And what I found is I've gotten older and I've got, you know, gotten higher up in my, you know, in my roles and stuff, is you really realize the importance of how much those people are relying on their relationships and the feedback from others. You know, and I actually have a great personal story around, you know, I became an enterprise director at this company I worked at. It was a new position no one had. And I didn't live in the corporate town like everybody else did. And so the CEO, he just saw me as this Southern California surfer kid, you know, who had great results and everybody liked, but like, he's like, I don't know, can he work remote? Is he going to take it serious? You know, all these different things, because the CEO didn't know me that well, right? But the other executives that I worked with daily, literally told him like, no, you have to hire this guy, right? And he's like, no, I want to hire the guy who's here local, living in Sacramento. It's easier. And they're like, no, you have to. And he told that story on I think it was like my 2-year anniversary of getting that job, and we shattered all these cool records. And in front of everybody, he told the story. He said, I didn't want to hire you for this. And I was like, you know, sinking in my chair. And he's like, no, but it's good because you had these people that I trust say, no, you got to give it to this person. And he goes, and the moral of the story is I couldn't have been more wrong. You know, obviously it was the right hire and I learned a lot or whatever. And so, but that's a story for me that I always like, it's like a proud moment where you go, okay, cool. But also it's a learning curve. You know, it's something that has taught me too, as I progress, is that, you know, we inherently all have our biases and we all see things from our, you know, angle. And so it's so important to utilize the people and the connections and the friends around us to make sure we're always making the right decisions. Do you know what I mean?
100%. That's a great story. Wow.
So I know I said like 45 minutes and we're already over, which I always do, but tell us about RetailU and how can people get involved in it?
Yeah, RetailU.ca. I always say .ca because people put retailu.com and they can't find it. So it's .ca is an online e-learning platform for retail leaders. And it's like, think of us like LinkedIn Learning, but for retail, because, you know, LinkedIn doesn't have a retail dropdown for field leaders. It just doesn't exist.
I mean, you know, retail is such a small career. It's not like there's not tens of millions of people doing it. So
28 million
LinkedIn,
people
come on, where you at?
apparently.
Actually, never mind. LinkedIn, don't. We want everyone to go to RetailU.
That's it.
True.
So yeah, it was created for managers that want to develop themselves or for companies that want to have the best tools and resources. Because when I was running district managers, they would be so proud every Monday to be like, I took my team through this TED talk last week and like created this document and coached them on this. And I was like, that's like, how many hours was that? 4 or 5 hours you could have spent coaching in a store, you know?
Yeah.
So I wanted to create something as a tool for them to have so that they didn't have to go and do it themselves. So it really is all micro-sized on-demand courses. I wrote all the content, so it's my IP, and it's like teaching you conflict management, team leadership, communication skills, problem solving. We've got diversity and inclusion on there now. So there's 23 courses, and you can access it. It's on a subscription basis. It's super, super affordable. I think it's like $99 a year for like 240 video lessons. There's a district manager course on there that doesn't exist anywhere because nobody teaches DMs how to be DMs. They just kind of get thrown in
Yeah.
to do it. So yeah, and then if companies want to buy it for their teams, they can do that too. But they can reach us through info@retailu.ca or just go on the site. Everything's on the site. You can select by role, what role you're in, create your own development plans. I am big on personal development plans because somebody once told me, if you're leaving it in the hands of somebody else, good luck. You'll stay where you are, right? So own your own development. So it's got all the tools to create your own development and all, planning and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's cool. And we have a lot
That's
of people using
awesome.
it now. Yeah, and it's really exciting when I get feedback from people and they're like, oh, I learned so much and it helped me in the conflict management course. Now I'm more confident. Because, you know, if you're more confident as a store manager or a district manager, you're going to lead better. You're going to make better decisions and people are going to want to work for you. So
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So LinkedIn is a really good. I'm on there all the time. Me and Ron are
Mhm.
like LinkedIn super users. So that's a really good way to message me through that. Or if you want to get hold of me, just direct April at RetailU, like U for university.ca, is my email. So you can just shoot me an email. I respond to everybody, very approachable.
Nice. So last question would be, and obviously we talked only real briefly about the book, but obviously this whole season, everyone having on the season are authors, and that's been kind of all the shows this season have been about that. And so there's also so many people out there that have these amazing ideas, or they've got this, as someone like me, I literally have like 9 different books partly written that I just haven't put out, and it's like, what would you say, what advice would you give to, aspiring authors or people that might have these great ideas or concepts to just get it done? How did you do it?
Well, I was sitting on Fiverr one day. I was in Panama on a vacation with a friend, and she's like, just go on Fiverr and find a copy editor or like a ghostwriter. Isn't that what people do? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know where to start. So we went on Fiverr, found this girl.
Wait,
Really,
what's Fiverr? I've never even heard of this.
Fiverr. It's a website where it's freelancers. So like all freelancers use Fiverr. I use
Okay.
it because I'm an entrepreneur. Fiverr. And I just searched on it, like write a book. And so somebody popped up and got a hold of her. She was a retired English teacher. She's amazing. She's got her own publishing company. And we started. And I said, I need help. I have this idea and I have like 80 blog posts. So I've got a lot of content. I've got leadership courses that I've written. So she said, send me everything. So I sent everything and we just started mapping it out. And then we just went backwards and forwards for I think it took us about 6 months because I was on it. It was COVID. I had nothing, I was at
Yeah.
home. And then then went back on Fiverr. How do I, format it for Amazon? So I did the whole self-publishing route.
Yep.
My daughter designed the cover, and that was it. Like I got somebody to help me because I didn't know where to start. And I'm a coach, right? So I believe that if you need help to get something done, go hire somebody that's the expert to help you do it. And you can do that in a very affordable way. It did not cost me a lot of money. And now because of the success of it, it's being published. Now we've gone through the publishing house, Balboa Press, which is going to come out next month on a bigger platform so that it can go into bookstores because it's just been on Amazon for the last year. So yeah, just do it, but just take action. Like take one action every day. And if it's just going on Fiverr today and searching like how to write a book and you find 3 people, just message them because once you
Yeah.
start that process, it's not so overwhelming.
Mhm. I love that. Such good feedback. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned a ton. I could talk, retail, sales, for hours. So you just have to like get me off this thing because otherwise I'll. But thank you so much. And obviously we will be able to put this out in a couple of weeks, and then everyone go check out her book. Obviously it'll be published by this new publisher next month, but in the meantime, you can check it out on Amazon.
Thanks so much, Brett.